are back. Amazingly, the Avengers Endgame still has not crept past Avatar.
Not even with that little sneaky thing they did.
Yeah,
with
well,
the little
that kicked him up. That kicked him up, and tying in with Spider-Man kicked him up a little bit. But it's a screen availability thing.
Yeah.
Because and then they also announced it's coming out on Blu-ray and 4K at the end of the month. So it's people are waiting.
Why are people going to spend that money? Yeah.
But it's it'll get there. It'll get there. The fact that people forget Avatar was a winter release and it had all of January, February, and half of March to just kind of run.
Yeah.
And Avengers Endgame stepped into a very crowded summer. Owned a few weeks.
Although everything tanked, it's not like screen availability.
Yeah.
All the screens, the Dark Phoenix, you might have thought would be gone.
Yeah.
MIB 3 gone.
Yep.
You think those screens would be available?
But the other thing is that you got Disney films like Aladdin, Toy Story 4, and Lion King, which have all those screens locked up, and Disney's not going to give up any of those screens for Endgame.
Yeah.
So I mean, it'll get there, but it's creeping along. Anyway, well, we're going to dive right into it. Start with some docs, and then we got television, and then we have a whole host of classic movies, Criterion's and Twilight Time and Warner Archive and a lot of fun stuff. So we're gonna dive right into it.
Oh boy!
Starting off, a really interesting Virgil Films doc here called "We Are Columbine," and this is specifically going into the stories of 4 people who were survivors of Columbine in 1999,
Wow.
20 years ago. 20 years ago. So they're adults now. They're not kids. They have lives, and they have some perspective on it. And so this is looking back. It's a pretty brisk doc. It's not trying to be comprehensive. It's not sort of trying to say, now that we're 20 years past Columbine, this is what it means. This is what we've learned. This is what needs to change. It's not doing that, and it shouldn't. It's about 75 minutes long. And it gets into it wants you to personalize some of these human stories that were a part of the tragedy, and there are other stories too, and it acknowledges that, and it leaves room for that, and it leaves room for debate, and it really wants to sort of be a conversation starter more than anything else. But it's actually quite good. Then we got a couple from PBS, both of them excellent, both of them war centric. The first is a Frontline, the trial of Ratko Mladic. Ratko Mladic, one of the war criminals, otherwise known as the Butcher of Bosnia, from the Bosnian War that took place in the mid-1990s and early and mid-1990s. And this goes into his trial, which I didn't realize took 5 years.
Yeah.
A 5-year trial?
Yeah.
I mean, that's... I don't know what That's just.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's quite interesting
if
because
you compare it to say the Nuremberg trials.
Yeah, which was boom in a heartbeat. So anyway, this is very, very interesting. You learn a lot about what war crimes tribunals are. They're very different. It's not like a regular criminal trial. There are a lot of the thresholds, the laws, the rules, the international laws that apply, the rules of court. What you have access to, what you don't, how testimony is gathered, all that stuff is really very, very interesting. So this is another absolutely superb Frontline. It's about 2 hours long. We've also got Korea, the never-ending war, and this, of course, is a topic of conversation again. And now that North Korea is kind of on the grid with international relations again, and Kim Jong-un is having powwows with Donald Trump. So this revisits, and John Cho narrates this, by the way, which is perfect. It's really, really great. So this sort of revisits the war, how it started, and goes on to primarily focus on what the war has meant since 1953, when the ceasefire took place. And of course, the war still hasn't ended. They're still technically at war. Can't imagine at 2053 they'll probably still be at war. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And then we've got Invisible Hands from First Run Features. Invisible Hands is by a filmmaker named Shraisi Tandon. Shraisi Tandon. I hope I'm not destroying her name. I apologize in advance if I am. And this is all about child labor and trafficking in between the seams of international commerce. So, for example, we know that, okay, blood diamonds, right? If diamonds very often have child labor somewhere behind the chains. Nike sneakers, somewhere there might be child labor involved. Now we're learning too that your electric car, the precious earths in the batteries of your electric car are mined by children somewhere, right? And so people are just panicking now over the fact that they're like, is there anything that isn't exploiting a child somewhere in the world down the supply line?
Yeah.
And how do you know? That's where this gets into, and that's why when you go to like Whole Foods Market, for example, they will have certain fruits and vegetables tagged so that you know that these come from independent farmers somewhere, as opposed to a giant conglomerate that might be exploiting a local farmer. So that we've cut out many of the guilty parties. So anyway, Shraisi Tandon, former journalist, and knows this material very, very well, working with Charles Ferguson, the Oscar-winning filmmaker as well. And they interview all the people who know all about this stuff, and they really get into the nitty-gritty of it. And it's very, very good, and it's very informative. And it'll, if you want to try to hone your choices in what you buy and from whom and what companies, then it'll help you get there. Then we've also got two more. The Most Dangerous Year is an unfortunately not very balanced documentary that deals with a group of it takes place primarily around a single state, and it's on legislation that might impact families that have transgender children. So this looks at a number of those families who are sort of pleading their case and saying, don't pass this legislation. And unfortunately, it really doesn't present two sides. This is a straight up advocacy cinema piece from the point of view of these people. And so, it's basically a lengthy proposition campaign commercial. Some, compelling stories here, but nothing that's going to convince anybody who isn't already convinced, and nothing that probably won't play just as strongly to the other side. This could just as easily be a campaign commercial for the people that they oppose. So that's part of the problem with advocacy cinema very often, is that by virtue of omitting a point of view, you are kind of handing the opponent something to run with.
Look, all the way back to the early days of Michael Moore.
Yeah.
And before him too, but he was, because that film Roger and Me was so successful.
True,
and it completely changed the dynamic of what we used to call documentary filmmaking.
Yeah.
That I've always said this, and by the way, I'm a big old progressive like Michael and all that. Our politics are about the same. He has never made a documentary.
No,
not
never.
one, not
once.
ever, not in his whole life.
Nope.
And what he does is what he does, but it's not documentary filmmaking.
No,
it's not.
And I always reference the Maisleys on things like this. The Maisleys would let the material just kind of speak for itself, and they're not going to editorialize. They're not going to comment on it. You like this person, you hate this person. That's fine.
As
That's
close
good.
to fly on the wall as they could possibly be, and it's as much discovery of information from wherever it comes from about the subject as they could find.
Yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And then the last one here: Eternity Has No Door of Escape. Encounters with Outsider Art. This is one of those docs. This is from Icarus Home Video. And this is one of those docs where you have to applaud somebody, because normally if you're a documentary filmmaker, you look at the economics of your business and you think, okay, I would love to make a documentary about the most obscure thing that I'm passionate about, but maybe 5 people might see it, and it's going to cost me who knows how many thousands of dollars of my own money and years of my own time that I don't have, because I got to pay rent and pay a mortgage and feed a family and do whatever else you got to do. So those stories wind up never getting told. Except in cases like this, where somebody somehow found the money and found the resources and was able to go and kind of delve into a really, really kind of a fringe topic that nobody else will probably ever deal with again. And this basically uses it as its central launching point, the Gottardo Art Gallery in Switzerland, and a very, very specific exhibition there that deals with what is known as art brut, which means outsider art. And this is a whole different class of art. It's a very specific subculture of art that is kind of where surrealism intersects with with kind of protest art, with avant-gardism. I mean, it's a really, really very interesting and specific school of art and art philosophy. And they talked to a lot. They talked to a lot of people. I mean, this must have taken a lot of time to gather these people together, get their interviews, and it's quite interesting. Eternity Has No Door of Escape: Encounters with Art's Outsider Art. So it's a wonderful, wonderful doc about some otherwise overlooked stuff. All right, TV. Let's dive into TV.
I'll do these big box sets first, just because they're super duper interesting. The first one being Trial and Retribution, a British crime drama series. It was just fantastic. This series began back in the 90s, like 97 or so. David Heyman in the series. What it did is more or less what they do on I think Law and Order. They follow a crime from the discovery of whatever the crime is, usually a murder, completely through the process of bringing charges to someone, and then follow that completely through the judicial process.
Terrific.
Right down to the verdict. And the thing of it is, you don't always know what the verdict is going to be in these, and sometimes the verdicts don't go the way that you think that they would go. And I think that I always thought that the title of this series was interesting too. It wasn't called Trial and Justice. It was called Trial and Retribution. That tells you where the mindset is of these particular filmmakers. I got to tell you, this stuff is so good. Sometimes you felt like you were watching true stories. They're not. It's a scripted series, but that's how good the writing was in this series. Then we got on both DVD and on Blu-ray, Gotham, the complete series. You know what? I'm a fan of this series, and I've watched it all.
So Luke, our good friend Luke Y. Thompson, colleague of ours, who writes a lot about this stuff, Nerdist and about comics, and big Comic-Con guy. So Luke is of the opinion, and again, I haven't watched all of Gotham. I've watched a lot of it, but I haven't watched all of it. Luke is of the opinion that this is the best Batman there is. The best Batman story. Beats all the movies, beats all the TV series, animated, everything else. Luke thinks that Gotham basically is where it all comes together. Do you agree?
Well, this is all sort of super duper foundational.
Yeah.
It's true to the theme of Batman. I'll give it that. I buy this kid in that role of Bruce Wayne.
Young Bruce Wayne, yeah.
Now, it goes off in a couple of different directions, though. Barbara Gordon and who she is.
Yeah.
And all of that kind of stuff. So it really can't reconcile itself into the Batmans that we know.
No, it's a different approach. They're all different universes, basically.
Kind of different universes. So it sort of depends on what you mean. But it's very watchable, and I enjoy it a great deal.
Yeah.
So I'll give him that. My favorite Batman. I'm sorry, Tim Burton, Michael Keaton. You kidding me? Get the hell out of here, man. Jack Nicholson.
I'm still a Christian Bale guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Christian Bale guy.
Criminal Minds Season 1. With over 50 minutes worth of special features and all kinds of behind-the-scenes stuff and deleted scene stuff. And it's really, if you're a fan of Criminal Minds, never watched that series much, I must admit. Like Criminal Minds.
And now the one that we are so excited about.
The complete series, Space 1999, all 48 episodes.
On Blu-ray.
On Blu-ray. It's just really, really fantastic. All kinds of brand new stuff, new interviews with cast and crew and audio commentaries and vintage featurettes.
And I just want to say, this is exactly why we love Shout Factory, because Shout Factory will pick up the baton where others have left it. You know, what people have groused about for a long time. Space 1999 came out years ago from A&E Home Entertainment.
Yeah,
DVD, when A&E was still a thing, when A&E Home Entertainment was a thing. And then they came out with the first season on Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. And that was it. There was never a second season on Blu. They never came out with a second season on Blu-ray. You buy a British import if you wanted.
And that was still A&E.
It was still A&E.
Okay.
They did what so many shows have done, and that was they put it out, and there wasn't sort of enough heat on it, and they figured, screw it, forget the second season. And you're like, no, come on.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, then put the whole thing out. See, they were being greedy, right? They were thinking, we'll put the first season out, and then we'll get them to pay double dip for the second season. And then the first season didn't sell well enough, and now you regret not putting the second season out. So don't do that.
Yeah,
you're screwing people over.
Yeah, and you screwed yourself too.
It's lame.
But
no, this is just so great to have finally a proper Blu-ray set of Space 1999.
It's a gorgeous box too. I just love it. The red, white, and that sort of powder blue, and a fantastic series this was. It got a little spacey toward the latter.
Well, the second season was, there were a lot of things that happened between the first and the second season, not just changing the theme song, but for starters, Jerry Anderson and Sylvia Anderson started fighting and eventually got a divorce.
Yeah.
So the divorce happens kind of in that scene.
Yeah.
And
same thing happened to Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. Yeah.
And they changed the tone of the show. They obviously got rid of Barry Morse and they brought on Maya, right? So you get rid of Victor, and you get Maya, and then they introduced then Tony and Maya have their thing. They figured they needed a better romance since Landau and Bain weren't bringing it, and so it became. And then every week was some bug-eyed monster that invaded, and then Maya had to turn into the monster.
And they were plainly sort of biting at Star Trek at that point, in terms of the sort of he became sort of an action guy.
Yeah, and they needed to stick with what they were for the first season, which was very much his own show. This sort of metaphysical, weird, space is weird. And it was very different from Star Trek.
Koenig was a thinking guy. He didn't grab a gun and go punch people in the face.
No, he was not Kirk.
Yeah, man.
Oh, well.
Couple more?
Yeah, hit those and then I'll do these.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is Jonny Quest, the complete original series. Dude, 1964.
Crazy, right?
Well, for one thing, in this series, and I think for a while this went away in like the early '80s because people they had that new sort of modern Jonny Quest because there's a lot of stuff you can't do anymore.
Yeah,
Jonny Quest has a carbine in the opening credits of this series, and he's just cranking with this. What is he, 12 in this series or something like that?
It's nuts. Yeah, it's gotta be like 12.
He's cranking with this carbine. He kills like 6 guys in a boat. It's like and Race is like, good shooting, Johnny.
Yeah,
it's like, oh no, you can't. You can't do any of that anymore.
No.
I loved Jonny Quest. I don't think you can do the Haji thing the way they do it
Not anymore.
in the original series anymore.
Not anymore.
Although I want to point out that bugs me a little bit because Haji was as smart, if not smarter, than Jonny Quest.
Yeah.
And just as capable in every possible way.
Yeah.
And Haji sounded like a person from India. What the hell is wrong with actually sounding like the nation that you're from? I don't get that.
This is one of these things where I think a lot of people do overreact through political correctness to things that were not only of their moment, but which were also quite progressive for their moment.
Yeah.
And one of those, in that vein, is when I listen to all the old Jack Benny shows with Rochester.
Yeah.
Now people are like, "Oh, that's such a step and fetch it caricature," but no,
you're not
Rochester is the smart one.
Yes.
Rochester always has Jack Benny on the ropes. He's telling him the truth. He's telling him when he's being stingy. And the only person who ever acts with common sense is Rochester.
Yes, you're missing it. You're missing
the whole point of that.
And I remind people all the time, people talk about, you go all the way back to Hattie McDaniel.
Yeah.
And people talk about Hattie McDaniel. Like, first of all, black folks at the time in 1939, I think it was, that Hattie won that Oscar for that role, were very proud of Hattie McDaniel, who lived here in Los Angeles.
She won other awards. She won an NAACP award.
She was beloved. And then I remind people, if you pay attention to the movie, the black woman decides what the white girl is going to do.
It's true.
She decides. I decide what you're going to wear. I decide when you're going to take a bath. I decide who you're going to be in this room with. The black woman.
And Selznick was very conscious about that
too.
too.
She's running the whole damn thing. The sister. But anyway, lots and lots of special features on this Jonny Quest original series Blu-ray. Fantastic stuff. I love it.
I'm going to hit a few here. The Old Man of the Sea with Anthony Quinn, television production. Not the movie.
1990. That one.
This was 1990. So this is not the Spencer Tracy movie by any stretch. Which is still kind of the standard, even though it's not that faithful. This is more faithful, but doesn't have quite the same production value. This is from S'more Entertainment. But here's the thing: Anthony Quinn really is the better Santiago.
Yeah.
I sort of wish I could have taken Anthony Quinn. And no offense to Spencer Tracy, but I wish I could take Anthony Quinn's performance and drop it into that Spencer Tracy movie.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that this still isn't quite there, quite isn't where you want the story to be, at least in terms of production value. Anthony Quinn is terrific.
Yeah.
And
I remember watching that movie in 1990.
I do too.
Young Patricia Clarkson, young Gary Cole.
Yeah.
In that movie, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it's he really owns it, and that's what makes it great. So it's still very much a TV movie of its period, but boy, Anthony Quinn is terrific. And then we got a couple from PBS here, Les Miserables from Masterpiece. So this is Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, not a musical version of it. And this was done for British television and is quite good. I got to be honest; it's better than I expected it to be. And I've always been a huge fan of the old one with Tony Perkins from 1980. What was that? 83, 82, something like that. That was the one that I always kind of focused on, and this really compares very, very favorably. It was written by Andrew Davies, who did Pride and Prejudice, and has a terrific cast. I mean, a really terrific cast. Lily Collins is wonderful. Dominic West is great. David Oyelowo shows up in this as well. Olivia Colman, the Oscar winner from The Favorite. It's a beautiful, beautiful rendering of it, and it is on Blu-ray and has a couple of extras on it as well. It's got an introduction to the story and some featurettes, and that's really kind of all you need. So it's a Blu-ray of a new PBS British television, Les Miserables.
Oh, man.
And then the second season of Frankie Drake Mysteries, if anybody has been following that. This is not the greatest British mystery show. It takes place in Toronto. We should point out, when I say British, I'm talking about British Empire. I include Australia, New Zealand, and Canada in the British TV realm. And this is so in terms of British mystery and all of its Commonwealth acolytes. This is not better than anything that you would normally get, but it's the fact that it takes place in Toronto in the 1920s is interesting, and you're dealing with female detectives. That's interesting. So I mean, there is something to it, and it's made a second season. Presumably, it'll make a third as well. So there it is. What else?
Indeed. Okay, so Volume 2 of the 1940s, Popeye the Sailor, 15 color theatrical shorts. This stuff is just so wonderful. I grew up sort of watching those 60s Popeye the Sailors. Yep. This stuff is so much better. The color is so much more vibrant. Look, it's better animation.
It is.
The studio animation that they were doing in the 40s as opposed to the television stuff that they were doing in the 60s. So this is just really, really wonderful. 15 uncut cartoons, never before released, mastered from the original Technicolor, Cinecolor masters there. Heart Guy from Acorn Television. Heart Guy Series 1, 2, and 3. This is a pretty neat little series set in Australia about an arrogant heart surgeon who has a bad night with some alcohol and drugs and can no longer be an arrogant heart surgeon. Has to go back to his hometown and just sort of practice as a GP with his mom and his dad and all the.
It's another one of those. It's another one of those Northern Exposure variations.
Sort of variation, exactly Doc Hollywood kind of thing. But you know what? It's sort of
Doc Hollywood. Yeah, that's right.
It sort of feels kind of great. Yeah. And baseball's greatest picture. So this is the Dick Cavett show. A 3 DVD set of him doing nothing but talking to baseball pictures of yore. Whitey Ford, Bob Feller, Dizzy Dean. So look, Mickey Mantle. If you're a baseball, Tommy John. If you're after whom they named the surgery. If you're a baseball fan, watching Dick Cavett talk to these guys, 60s, 70s, I guess on up until the 80s, this goes. And it's just really, really, really great. For one thing, you know what they hardly ever talk about? Baseball. They talk politics. They talk male, female, you name it. They talk about it. But Dick Cavett, being who he is, and of course, Dick Cavett is a baseball fan, by the way. It's not that he couldn't talk baseball, and they did talk baseball. But mostly they strayed into the realms of conversation that you only got from Dick Cavett back in the day, and it's a really, really, really wonderful one to check out. Baseball's greatest hits, The Pictures, Dick Cavett Show.
All right, we're going to hit for the rest of the show. We're going to talk about some classic movies, and I'm going to start with a bunch of amazing Criterions that we have this week. Criterion just constantly keeps knocking it out of the park. We keep saying that, and I marvel at the amazing things they come out with, because it's always a mix of, well, of course we were going to get that on Criterion, and stuff where you go, oh, what an interesting choice. What a totally interesting left field choice. And that left field choice this week is The Baker's Wife. A lot of people thinking, The Baker's Wife? What the hell is The Baker's Wife? Why does that get the Criterion treatment? So here's why. The famous French author Marcel Pagnol, who of course wrote Jean de Florette and Madonna of the Spring and Fanny and a lot, all of these wonderful, wonderful pastoral stories that define the Provence region of France. And he was a regional artist. Pagnol wrote about that region around Marseille and Avignon and right there on the Mediterranean coast and life down there. And he really... He elevated those people, those simple provincial people, and their lives, and articulated it and recorded it in ways that nobody else ever has. And if you've seen Jean de Florette, you know that this is just magnificent stuff. Well, Pagnol was also a filmmaker. He was the first person to actually adapt many of his own novels into stories. The original Madonna of the Spring was one of his. The Marseille Trilogy was something he's very famous for. One of the films that is lesser known is The Baker's Wife from 1938, which is, it's a beautiful look at this small provincial village in Provence, the south of France, and centering basically around a baker and his wife. And in that way, it's a little bit like Marty. It's sort of like a French provincial version of Marty. And the actor who plays the baker is Raimou, who was a famous actor of the time. Was really not ever a thing in Hollywood or in the United States, but Orson Welles was a huge admirer of him, and many other people just praised Raimou. Really a very, very famous actor of the day, and he is wonderful here. And I can't compare it to anything else other than Marty. It is sweet and funny and affecting, and it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. Like most Pagnol films, it's also long. It's over 2 hours long, so you have to get used to the pace. It's a very, very deliberate pace. But what a sweet, wonderful movie, The Baker's Wife from 1938 on Criterion Blu-ray from Marcel Pagnol. Of course, this is going to be on Blu-ray from Criterion this week, is Fassbinder's the legendary Fassbinder trilogy of the BRD trilogy, Marriage of Maria Braun, Veronika, Voss, and Lola. All of these are absolutely superb films. They are all legendary films. They are all masterpieces, and you just have to own this. If you are any kind of a cinephile, this must be on your shelf. It has been out on DVD previously. It has never been out on Blu-ray. It is out finally on Blu-ray. And The Marriage of Maria Braun is arguably the one that is the greatest of these. If you have to sort of rank them, that's something that a lot of us studied the screenplay for in school. It is an extraordinary script. And I remember, in one of my classes, we like marking that script up and the things that he does in it and the tricks that he does to move the story into really interesting directions. And the way that this sort of defines the new German cinema that Fassbinder and Wim Wenders and Herzog and so many others were a part of in the aftermath of the Oberhausen Manifesto, where they were sort of revolting against the tropes and the traditions of what German cinema had been prior to the late 60s and early 70s. Tons of extras here that'll just blow your mind, on and on and on and on. There are audio commentaries that were originally recorded in 2003 featuring Wim Wenders and Michael Ballhaus and Tony Raines, and on. Tons of interviews with actors and actresses in the film, including Hanna Scheigele, who's just magnificent in Marriage of Maria Braun in particular. In other interviews from 2003 with cinematographer Xaver Schwarzenberger and screenwriter, on and on. There's even a feature-length documentary from 1992 about Fassbinder that I had never seen before, which is just what a tempestuous life and career, and such a genius and such a tormented genius. All of this stuff is it's so rich. 3 movies and then like 2 movies worth or 3 movies worth of additional extras. It's the BRD trilogy. It is, you gotta have it. Europa from Agnieszka Holland. otherwise known as simply Europa when it was Oscar nominated. A story of a young Jewish man played by Marco Hofschneider, young Jewish boy, basically, who has to figure out how to not be arrested and sent to a concentration camp, and basically goes through an elaborate ruse to pretend that he is not Jewish. And it is quite a fascinating story, based in truth, and really done beautifully by Agnieszka Holland. Might be her best film. And this gets a great video essay from Annette Insdorf, who is always wonderful, wonderful to listen to and to watch. Also has an interview with Salomon Perel, who wrote the book that this is based on. So it is technically his story. He wrote an autobiography. I've never been quite sure where the autobiography leaves off and the movie picks up, but he does certainly discuss some of that in the interview. I wish he discussed it a little bit more. And then there are new interviews with Agnieszka Holland and Marco Hofschneider, who's quite a bit older now, and the original 2008 Agnieszka Holland commentary as well. So Europa on Blu-ray. And then our last Criterion Blu-ray of the week I want to talk about because of the year that it came out. This is Klute from 1971. Now, Klute is really I can't believe we haven't had a Blu-ray of this on Criterion yet. Alan Pakula's film that features that absolutely amazing performance by Jane Fonda as the prostitute, an equally incredible performance by Donald Sutherland. Really a great film in every conceivable way. Alan Pakula, All the President's Men might be the only other film that sort of compares with this. But here's the thing. And great extras. Let me just get into it, too. This is Blu-ray from a new 4K digital transfer that overseen by Michael Chapman, the great cinematographer. There's a new interview with Jane Fonda conducted by Ileana Douglas, which is wonderful and really insightful. And there's even a new little mini documentary that's all about the film and Alan J. Pakula. New interviews, a short documentary that they made during the shooting of the film, basically like the original EPK. All this stuff is great. But here's the thing. 1971 is one of the epic years in movie history. We don't often talk about it, but 1971 didn't just give us Klute. It gave us Clockwork Orange. It gave us Fiddler on the Roof. It gave us The Emigrants. It gave us so many extraordinary movies. It just blows your mind. Just look at the Oscar-nominated films from that year alone. It gave us Shaft. On and on and on. 1971 was an amazing movie year. It's just breathtaking. Everything that came out that year is through the roof. It's just, you can go onto the internet, do a Google on 1971 Oscars, and look at the films that were nominated for Academy Awards in 1971. It'll freak you out. You won't believe it. It's like 30 or 40 classics just that were nominated for Oscars. And once you blow that out to the films that were not Oscar nominated, forget about it. It was about every week you were getting a masterpiece or two all year long. And what an amazing year it was. So Klute is hopefully the beginning of the first of many great 1971 films that will soon be coming out on Blu-ray. What else we got?
Let's see. Falling into the, I guess these are classic movies. Most of these, although I'm holding Major League in my hand.
Yeah, 30th anniversary for Major League.
Yeah, 1989.
It's the same. It's the same Blu-ray. I brought it out because it's
it's
30th
Major
anniversary.
League. You know what? David Ward wrote and directed this film back during a period when a guy could write a film and direct it.
Right.
Who was basically just nobody and cast it up. It's a fun movie, though, about a woman who inherits the Cleveland Indians, and she wants to move into Miami, so she has to have a losing season. So she gets all these, what she hopes are a bunch of losers on her team. Charlie Sheen, Charlie Sheen, and Corbin Burnson, and Tom Berenger. Sherman, the Wesley Snipes part in this.
Yeah.
He read 3 times for that part.
Really?
Yeah, but Wesley got it. Yeah, well, that's what it's going to be. Interesting thing. And a lot of fun. So anyway, this goofy movie, I think there was a Major
League. It's basically
League
the producers with baseball.
With baseball instead. And they turn out to actually be pretty damn good. Jess Franco's Attack of the Robots. Which 1966 film, which had a different title. The actual film had a different title. Anyway, it's about a mad scientist and his army of robots, and it's part Bond because it was 1966 and everything had a little touch of Bond to it back then. But it's a lot of, sort of a neat and classy film. that looks kind of cool. I think anyway. Jess Franco in black and white French film with a few special features, including the English language soundtrack and an audio commentary by let's see, the author of Obsession, the films of Jess Franco. Kinda
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
There. The 1924 Silent Peter Pan.
Oh, so good.
So beautiful. This film, which though it was directed by a guy named Herbert Brinton, was produced by Jesse Lasky and Adolf Zucker
Right.
as executive producers. And
Forerunners of Paramount Pictures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where the sort of lineage of this comes from. Anyway, it's an absolutely beautiful little restoration of this film. It looks gorgeous. It's 2K restoration. With a new score and a commentary by historian Kat Ellinger and an essay and an audio interview with the actress Esther Ralston, who obviously was in the film and obviously survived long enough to do this audio interview. So you want it for that, if nothing else. Good stuff.
From Twilight Time, it's a really interesting month for Twilight Time. It's all about the women, but in a really interesting way. So there are sort of 3 classes of films that we have here between the 4, and 2 of them belong together. And first off, we've got a couple of Betty Grable movies. Now, Betty Grable, the 20th Century Fox musicals. So Warner made musicals. MGM made crazy musicals, and people often forget that, there were also other studios making musicals, and one of them was Fox. And Fox made some pretty darn good musicals. Betty Grable was the centerpiece of most of them, most of the best ones, and they've got 2 of them here from Twilight Time. They went and licensed these from 20th, and thank goodness, Mother Wore Tights and Pinup Girl. And they are both really, really fun, and they have great supporting performances as well. Pinup Girl is the one that is probably the most famous of all of them. This is from 1944, and she plays a USO hostess, and there's like a double life storyline to it, and Joe E. Brown is in it, and he's very, very funny, and Martha Ray is in it, and she's very, very good, and. But ultimately, you're watching that just because Betty Grable is a totally magnetic screen presence. She's absolutely terrific, and it's got a certain gloss and a sheen to it. It feels a little bit like a slightly lesser MGM musical, and good on them for it. Mother Wore Tights is slightly less known, but really no less enjoyable. Also has a really, really great cast, great supporting cast. And this is from a few years later in 1947, centers around, directed by the great Walter Lang, by the way, who would go on to do State Fair and The King and I. And this is all about a family of vaudevillians. And it's one of a number of movies that dealt with the world of vaudeville in the 30s and 40s, because most of the people in Hollywood in the 30s and 40s who were doing musicals came from a vaudeville background. So you have a whole bunch of these, Gene Kelly was in 2 or 3, I think, even. For Me and My Gal, I think, kind of dealt with that as well. And so Mother Wore Tights is basically one of those, and there's a lot of nostalgia. At that point, people are aging out of the vaudeville era, and they're looking back on it. And so these movies are very, very calculated to tap into that. And Mother Wore Tights is a really, really fun one. Dan Daly co-stars with her and is absolutely delightful as well. Great score, too, from Alfred Newman. Also in stock at 20th Century Fox at the time doing musicals was Alice Faye. Alice Faye was kind of the second tier to Betty Grable at the time. And Twilight Time has also given us Hello Frisco, Hello, which is a 1943 Alice Faye musical that is also centered around the world of vaudeville. Specifically in San Francisco, and kind of creating that wonderful, wonderful backdrop. And this features Jack Oakey, who did a lot of shorts. One of the great classic comic figures in shorts at the time, has kind of disappeared. The Academy here, the Oscar people, they have an annual lecture that they call the Jack Oakey Lecture on Comedy, which I think most people going to it don't even realize who Jack Oakey was. Yeah. Well, Jack Oakey is real funny. He's kind of portly. He's a little bit like if Curly were not a spaz on the Three Stooges, he'd be Jack Oakey. He's almost like he's physically more like Curly, but more like Larry in terms of his attitude. Anyway, really a Very, very sweet film, and other really, really fun performances in it from June Havoc and Lynn Barry. It's a good film, and I'm glad that it's been resurrected on Blu-ray from Twilight Time. Now, here's the other Twilight Time that does not go anywhere in the league with those. I love this movie, though. Written and directed by Matthew Chapman in 1980, just on the eve of Excalibur, one of my all-time favorite movies, starring Helen Mirren, Hussy.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
look, it's
You can't even call a movie that anymore.
You can't.
You can't even use that title anymore.
Helen Mirren is just... I fell in love with Helen Mirren in this movie.
Yeah.
Is it a little dirty? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the whole... That's the whole point of it.
She's a hussy.
Yeah,
And,
but
look.
she's. I mean, essentially, this was one of the first movies of the 1980s to sort of delve into. It's building on the British crime films, and it's getting you into the era of really blue collar movies that are looking at really a gritty part of London. And Stephen Frears started making a lot of those. And, Sammy and Rosie got laid. So a lot of the working class stuff, Ken Loach and Mike Lee, the things that they would do. Hussy sort of anticipates a lot of that. And yeah, she's a hooker. I'm sorry. She is a hooker, and she is tough, and she is awesome, and she's great. But she the way she plays it, she's not playing it in an exploitive way. She's really playing she's owning it. Yeah. And it contrasts interestingly with Klute. Her performance in Hussy and Jane Fonda in Klute really are kind of, they're sort of cut from the same cloth, an ocean apart. Yeah. And a decade apart. So very, very interesting. So Hussy, starring the amazing Helen Mirren and Paul Angelis and Murray Salem and John Shea. And, they're all in this as well. And Patty Boulay is good in this as well. But honestly, it's all about Helen Mirren in 1980.
Wow. I got a couple over here I'll knock off. Blu-ray, Jennifer Jones and this really neat film of The Wild Heart, Emmerich Pressburger and Michael Powell directed film from 1952. This is just a good movie. It's about this gypsy girl who lives sort of like out in the wilds of the woods, and she's married to this preacher, and there's this guy that owns the land around where she is, and she's just this she's Jennifer Jones, and she has this sort of connection to the animals. She casts these spells, and basically this guy decides he simply wants her, and he's gonna have her, despite the fact that she's married to the preacher. And it's about it's again a hard time making this film as a subject again. I think about these sometimes, this sort of Mad Dog and Glory kind of thing. You can't have a woman and her sexuality be the object of these two men making decisions about who's going to have her. I'll have her. Hey, excuse me, standing here, human being standing here, maybe I'll decide he'll have me. Yeah. Nevertheless, this is a wonderful film. Powell and Emmerich Pressburger there. Thunder Bay, a really neat and somewhat forgotten Anthony Mann film with James Stewart.
It is kind of. Yeah.
It is kind of, from 1953. Basically, what you have are these sort of wildcat offshore oil rigger guys, played by James Stewart and Dan Duryea in this film. And they're bumped up against these sort of Cajun shrimpers who, of course, use that water to do their fishing. And they're at odds with each other, and there's a woman involved, obviously, and hurricanes and fires on the rig and sabotage. And this was really a really intense sort of hardcore movie. And I'll tell you what, Jimmy Stewart is kind of the bad guy. And you don't have a whole lot of Jimmy Stewart playing the bad guy.
True,
he played the bad guy once or twice. But there's not a lot of times he plays the bad guy. This Island Earth from 1955, just a wonderfully classic science fiction film about aliens' attempt to take over the planet. This
all-time great.
This is just classic stuff.
I'm surprised it's never been remade, or that no one's ever even suggested remaking.
Yeah, because I think but for that white hair, remember the white hair?
Yeah.
But for that, you could probably.
But if they remade The Thing. Yeah, John Carpenter reconceptualized The Thing and all kind. I mean, you could do a number on This Island Earth. You really could,
and actually come up with something sort of interesting. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, special features include a new 4K scan of the original film element, so it looks really, really, really great, and all kinds of stuff that they did to the sound. A new audio interview with film historians and a couple of the filmmakers. Neat stuff for This Island Earth. on Blu-ray. You got some?
Yeah, let me hit the Arrow stuff. So we got got 2 from regular Arrow, 1 from Arrow Academy. The artier stuff is always on Arrow Academy, and this one is lovely. I'd forgotten this movie even existed. Mitchell Leeson's Hold Back the Dawn, starring Charles Boyer, Olivia de Havilland, and Paulette Goddard. How's that for an all-star cast?
Yeah, man.
Let me say that again. Charles Boyer, Olivia de Havilland, who is 103 years old right now, by the way. So a member of this cast is still around.
Still pissing off her sister if she were around.
Yeah, well, that was the joke, right?
Yeah.
That Joan Fontaine once said. She said, if I die first, Olivia will be mad because I did something else that I did first.
Yeah.
So and Paulette Goddard. So this is really a wonderful 1941 classic movie, directed by Mitchell Leeson, but bear in mind, written by Charles Brackett and Billy Wilder. So, yes, you always have to focus, and Billy Wilder wrote a lot of great stuff for other directors, and this is one of them. And boy, what an amazing script this is, and what a great cast. So much fun. And Charles Boyer is great. I mean, forget about the accent. He's playing a Romanian here. It doesn't really make any sense with the French accent, but he's this Romanian gigolo. This is so timely. Who tries to get into the U.S. through Mexico, and he has to wait for 8 years. I can't believe how timely this is. It's 1941. It's so hysterical how timely this is. So that may be why they even did it. Anyway, Paulette Goddard plays a former dancing partner of his, and Olivia de Havilland is this woman that he tries to get in with to get across the border. It's a whole border jumping thing. Anyway, it's really very, very clever. Billy Wilder, of course, being an immigrant and having fled Hitler and come here before World War II, brings a certain understanding of the experience that is very, very clever. And Olivia is great. Charles Boyer is great. I mean, it's just it's absolutely a terrific film. Hold Back the Dawn. It was big Oscar nominations in 1941, and of course, as we know, that year was dominated by How Green Was My Valley, and of course, Citizen Kane. So it kind of falls behind them a little bit. Then from Arrow regular, a couple of cultier, poppier titles. The Chill Factor is essentially a knockoff of The Exorcist that was one of many, many films trying to knock off The Exorcist in, pretty much throughout the 70s and 80s. There were just a ton of these. And it's okay. I mean, for what it is, it's like The Exorcist in snow, maybe is the best way to put it, and all takes place around snowmobiling, and it's a little cheesy, but it's at least kind of novel for its type. So, I mean, if you're into films of that sort, the one I really want to give a shout out to is The Loveless from 1981. This is an old Catherine Bigelow movie with Willem Dafoe, basically her version of Brando's The Wild One. You got a biker gang that's going on their way to the Daytona 500, and they go through this small town, and tension erupts between the biker gang and the town, basically in a Romeo and Juliet way, because Willem Dafoe kind of wants to get it on with one of the women in the town, and Dad's not too happy. Lots of extras on this thing. And by the way, there are a lot of extras on Chill Factor as well. I just don't consider them interesting enough to recommend. But The Loveless has a lot of really, really great extras on here, including new interviews with Willem Dafoe and a bunch of the other members of the cast. There's a new video that has interviews with the producers, one of whom is A. Kitman Ho, who's done a lot of Oliver Stone stuff. A new audio interview with Eddie Dixon, musician who did some music for the film. And it's a really great set. The Loveless. If you want to go and find an old Catherine Bigelow classic, she technically has the co-writing, co-directing credit with Monty Montgomery, but you watch it, you're like, it's a Catherine Bigelow movie.
Man, fantastic stuff. Funny. A little while ago, I showed you a scene from the little movie I was making, which is like my little homage to Buster Keaton and blah 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 and this kind of thing. Now, a guy that I was also recognizing in that is a guy named Charlie Bowers, who most people have never heard of.
Yeah.
In 1915, he started as an animator. and then a brilliant animator. And he did all kinds of stuff. He was a Bronco buster. They say he was kidnapped.
All those guys had
these wacky stories.
Yeah.
They say he says he was kidnapped when he was 6 by a traveling circus, and who forced him to become a tightrope walker, which apparently he was. In any case, he turned his attention to live action filmmaking in the very early 20s. Developed all kinds of photographic processes. He's one of those inventor-type guys. Something like Georges Méliès, where he could do things that would combine animation with live action. Again, we're talking about the teens and the 20s now. And he had this little character that he played. It's called Francois something or other. And he's a very Chaplin-esque, Harry Langdon, all of that was where he started work. Much of his work had been thought to have been lost, his short films, these many, many short films. Many of them have been found, and they've been put into this series. Charlie Bowers, short films 1917 to 1940,
Fantastic.
The Extraordinary World of Charlie Bowers. And I hope this sort of brings him back to the fore a little bit. Interesting guy. This is fodder for a feature film.
Yeah.
These guys who fall off the
It's great. Wonderful. And that's from Flicker Alley.
Yeah, from Flicker Alley.
They do a great job. I got some Blu-rays from. Well, actually, I'm going to start off. I'll leave the Blu-rays to the end. I'm going to do the DVDs, the DVD-Rs from Warner Archive here. This is mostly just culty stuff. It's it's a little bit of a mix, but these are all really fun discoveries for somebody who may have interest in some of these things. Warner Archive just goes into the archive and they find these movies that would otherwise fall between the cracks, and they have a lot of great libraries. They have all the old RKO stuff, they have all the old MGM stuff, and one of the old RKO films is What a Blonde. You couldn't really do this again today, but look. I can't even do justice to this unless we're doing video. Look at the taglines on that.
Oh, that's
all these cuties and no coupons. All these cuties and no coupons. Look,
this pigs. We really are.
This is really a comedy tour de force for Leon Errol, who was a good comedy character actor at the time. A little bit like Jack Oakey that we talked about earlier. Leon Errol had some wonderful, wonderful performances. And the premise here is so stupid, but it's hysterical. So basically he's a guy who's run, because of World War II, he's run out of his gas coupons because they're rationing everything. So he no longer has his gas coupons. So he and his butler, back when people had butlers, in order to keep the limo from running out of gas, they work up a scheme, and there are rules around what you can do to get coupons and so forth. So he just doesn't want to give up his lifestyle. So this winds up sort of precipitating a bizarre scheme that goes into some very, very funny areas. And the whole thing, look, it's just designed to let Leon Errol be funny and to do the shtick that he usually does, but it's still very, very fun. You also have South of Suez, which is a pretty standard adventure movie of the day. Warner Brothers made a lot of adventure movies that didn't look that adventurous. They're all shot on, sound stages and backlots, and nobody's going to Central America or Africa or anywhere else in these things. So anything that looks like, the wild parts of the world, it's not even close. This is all about looking for a diamond in Africa, known as the Star of Africa, and it's pretty much standard for what these films were at the time. Originally made by First National, and if you like the genre, you'll probably enjoy it. But it's definitely of its genre. Then real quickly, the last three here, Married Before Breakfast, is really just a great performance piece for Robert Young and Florence Rice. Just kind of a two-person movie. It's this one has sort of fallen off the radar pretty substantially. I didn't realize I had completely forgotten that this even existed, and it's it deals. How do I even go into this? This deals with certainly the economics of the time, which involved spending sprees and various things like that. Robert Montgomery is also really good with Sally Eilers in Made on Broadway, which is another one of these backstage things that people were very fond of at the time. They wanted to know what went on Broadway and how did who are the movers and shakers behind Broadway shows. It's basically what it is. It's just it's one of those backstage things, a chance to give Robert Montgomery an opportunity to be really cool with another actress. And then we also have Gangway for Tomorrow with John Carradine and Robert Ryan and Margot. What's funny is that Margot really completely fell off the map. Margot, who went like Cher by just one name, was really a thing for a moment in RKO Pictures, and things changed. RKO kind of ceased to be a major studio at a certain point, and all the stars that were associated with them went away.
Yeah,
but
she's hardly remembered. Hardly remembered. It's so crazy. Yeah,
hardly remembered at all. Anyway, this is kind of a war effort movie. It's a little bit of a propaganda film. Packs a lot of people in a bunch of different stories all together in what's basically meant to be like an anthology that raises money for war bonds and gets people rallied for the war effort. And that's perfectly fine. It's just 5 stories that are completely disconnected, but otherwise perfectly serviceable and a nice little war era artifact.
Mm-hmm. A couple of quick ones here.
Yeah.
The tough ones. 1976 film from Umberto Lenzi, who was just this terrible filmmaker that made all these really insanely violent cops, all of Italian violent cop films. And this one is just about as violent and as nutty as you can get this angry cop after these drug dealers. It's all stereotypical, but it's a lot of fun if you're into this kind of stuff. This one comes packed with all kinds of special features. And this film itself is the uncut, unrated director's version of the film. So check that out if you just must. I remember this movie from 1990, The Dark Side of the Moon, when all of these movies were being made. In the middle 80s, early 90s, all of them had to have some sort of a space element to them. It's set in 2022, and they get shot out there to space to work on some sort of weapons platform. But they miss it, and they end up going to the moon and orbiting the moon and landing on the dark side of the moon, and they run into some monsters on the dark side of the moon. You could make movies like this back in the day. You could not make these today. No, sir.
All right, we're going to end with some Warner Archive Blu-rays that are so long overdue. So let me first of all, I love the one sheet for this. This is None But the Brave, directed by, that's right, Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what's really, really cool about this.
1965.
1965. This is such. First of all, Frank Sinatra could direct.
Yeah.
He didn't. I think this is it. I don't think he did any other films as a director.
I don't think so either.
But he nailed it. He really nailed it. And it's a war film. It's not like a two-hander or something. It's really challenging. It's a really interesting one sheet, which they chose for the art too, because he wanted to tout the fact that there were two sides to the war. And even though, yes, the Japanese were the enemy 20 years ago in 1965, he wanted to take a different approach, a revisionist approach, like Clint Eastwood did with Westerns.
Yeah.
And look at that.
Or even,
half the poster are the Americans with Frank Sinatra, and the other half are the Japanese actors, headlined by Tatsuya Mihashi. And basically, it's the story of an American transport that crashes on a Japanese-held island. So it's a behind enemy lines kind of thing. But it's a really smart script, written by John Twist and Katsuya Susaki. And Sinatra really nails it, man. He does a wonderful, wonderful job. There are some surprising supporting performances here. Clint Walker, Tony Bill, and Rayford Johnson that you just wouldn't expect. Like, why would Frank Sinatra cast those guys? It's not like they were A-list actors, any of them. But he makes them. They give him great performances.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I did a piece for John Raby's show about directors that were one and done. Actors who were directors that were one and done. I wish I had put Frank on that because that is his only feature director on television. But it was him and Nicholson. There were a couple that just directed one movie and tapped out.
And then the last two, Corvette Summer, starring my neighbor, Mark Hamill, and the wonderful Annie Potts. This movie doesn't get enough love. This is a total movie of its day. This is quite it. Look,
fell in love with Annie Potts so hard.
And part of the problem is that Mark Hamill is coming off of Star Wars. This is 1978, and you almost can't win. Everybody's like, "Oh, but you're not Luke Skywalker." He's an actor, man. Give him some room to breathe. But there was too much residue. Star Wars was still in so much in everybody's consciousness. Nobody really wanted to cut him a break and let him be an actor, and it's too bad. This is a really fun movie. It's just, it's like an American Graffiti kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Hamill is terrific, and Annie Potts is wonderful,
Yeah.
and it's a fun movie. And then we're going to go out on the movie that is a movie for our time, Gaslight. When you hear people talking about gaslighting, which is a big political thing now and online, and when people troll you online, and everybody's gaslighting everybody now. Okay, it comes from this movie. That's where the idea of gaslighting originates. Once again with the great Charles Boyer, this time not as a Romanian, along with Ingrid Bergman and Joseph Cotten. What an absolutely wonderful thriller, a terrific, terrific thriller, one of the all-time greats from 1944, and some of the best direction that George Cukor ever did. And George Cukor was mainly known for his women's pictures, for romantic comedies, for My Fair Lady, for Adam's Rib, things like that. But Cukor could be Hitchcockian. Yeah. And he turns the screws here, and he does a wonderful, wonderful job. This won Ingrid Bergman her first Academy Award, very deservedly. And, boy, is Charles Boyer creepy. He really nails it. Joseph Cotten, Dame
Angela Lansbury.
18 years old she was in this movie.
It's fantastic.
It's an absolutely superb movie. Originally made by MGM, now in the Warner Brothers Library, now on Blu-ray from the Warner Archive Collection. And folks, that is it. What a whirlwind this week. All right, we are done. It is a hot summer here. We hope you go out and do something other than movies. Enjoy the summer.